We have a great panel for you today. I know this because I've spoken to them all individually, and in doing so found out that they all secretly know each other. So this is kind of part reunion, part panel. I know Ryan used to work for John, and Isla pitched to John some time ago, so it's kind of, we're keeping it in the family here. I would love to spend today talking about a few different things. So we all know the kind of category that we're in now. We are in that kind of non-alc space. I would argue that it's no longer contained within health and wellness. It is so much more than that. It is about living well and the choices people make to do so. And these brands are really the kind of rocket ship brands in this space. And I think we've got a lot to learn from them. First of all, I'd love to talk about the kind of the category today, the culture and what has shifted and why we are all behaving differently, drinking differently, socializing differently. Then talk about some of their experiences with their brands and what they've done. And then finally talk about how they are planning to grow, target consumers, and what they're going to do in the future that we can all learn from. So I'll just give them a very quick introduction and then let them introduce themselves. Isla has worked on all sides of the alcohol world, from very alcoholic things to semi-alcoholic things, and now creating Parch, which you're going to get to try fairly shortly after this. The good thing about Mocktails is you don't feel like a deadbeat for drinking them at 11:30. She has amazing perspective on what has shifted in culture and why now is the time for brands like hers to thrive. And then John at the end is a sort of soothsayer who has understood throughout the last kind of decade or so exactly when to invest and how to grow and scale brands at that intersection of lifestyle, wellness, and CPG. And Ryan, who worked for John up until, what was it, 3 weeks ago? Is now at the helm of an amazing new brand called Trip in the space, which is, again, I think through this conversation we'll see that the categories are all blending and merging. So Trip is, in some regard, a sort of social drinking replacement, but it is equally a challenger to sodas and the way we've been drinking those in the past too. So everyone's going to have amazing perspectives. I will try and do less talking than this for the remainder. But Isla, just first of all, tell us about Parch for a second. Which is your personal favourite SKU and when you like to drink it?
Great. Thanks, John. Great to be here. Lovely to meet you all. My name's Isla Byrne. I created Parch with my co-founder, Rodolfo Aldana. Both of us worked at the largest spirit company in the world, Diageo, makers of brands like Donohue, which Rudy actually ran for a decade. So if you know that brand, it's partly because of him. While he was there, he was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of cancer. The next day, he was issued into treatment, surgery, and stopped drinking that very day. 2 years later, he was fully recovered and chose not to go back to drinking alcohol. But he soon realized he felt very socially isolated. He was missing out on lots of drinks that he really wanted to enjoy with his friends, and really missed the craft and the complexity of exotic cocktails in particular. So he came to me. I created Parch for him as a consultant. We ended up loving working together, and we decided to launch it. 2 years later, I drink about 70% less alcohol. I drink the prickly paloma in place of my regular weekly wine. He drinks all of them. I drink the spiced Pinot Rita, which is a mezcal-style cocktail, in my cocktail moments, and I still drink alcohol, but I drink about 70% less. Most evenings, to answer the last question, it is an alcohol moment for these drinks. We'll be trying them in the morning, but you'll be disappointed to have them for like a workout drink or a morning drink. They're an alcohol alternative in the evening, and for many people, they work in the weekday or as your third cocktail of the evening. So they're complementary to the alcohol in your house or at bar.
Very good, thanks, Isla. And I like, I think your point is something that seems true of the category now. That binary has broken down between you either drink or you don't drink, either on a specific occasion or as a kind of lifestyle choice overall. And that kind of flexibility, I think, really plays into what your three brands are doing. Ryan, what about you? Tell us about Trip, you, and what's tasty about it.
Yeah, it's funny, when I was first invited to this, it was on behalf of the SWA. John Kane. I just started Trip 3 weeks ago. Very excited to be with this brand. based out of the UK. They've been around just under 5 years, or 5 years this month actually. They've been known as a CBD brand, but we just recently launched our Mindful Blends range. Has great adaptogens like magnesium, ashwagandha, L-theanine, ginseng, and there's one other one in there. But we have a whole range of beverages. I think John and I have talked a lot about within the beverage space, flavor is always number one thing that people are looking at, and flavor has to be key. It's what keeps customers coming back to your brand. But having that functionality is also a very important part. So at Trip, we have the functional ingredients in there. Our flavors are very flavor focused, really unique flavors to all of the different 4 varieties that we have. And really Trip is set out to help people find their calm in everyday chaos. So I think within this space, there's a lot of white space that's still being painted on, and it's not necessarily something where all of us need to be competing with each other, but more that finding your niche and what that is for your brand. And so for us at Trip, it's helping people with this epidemic of stress and anxiety and helping find your calm in everyday chaos.
And it's so rare that you get the chance to create a category like this that feels like it is all blue ocean out in front of you. And like you say, John, you mentioned this earlier, you guys aren't fighting against each other. You are fighting against the enormous behemoths, and that's where you're going to steal your share from and grow your brands. So John, tell us a little bit about Dessoir. Tell us about Dessoir, and what do you love about it, and when do you see its key occasions that you love to sip on it?
Yeah, like you mentioned, I met Ela a while ago. I invested in Dessoir in the spring of 2022 with my partners on the venture capital side of how I spent part of my time. And we were looking at the space really from the standpoint of, is the category really here to stay? Is it going to grow? I've been in beverage and consumer for 20-some years, kind of full-time. And most of it's been in beverage, both with alcohol and without. And like Tom mentioned, I think it's a rare moment in time for a category to be growing this fast and really to be so aligned with what consumers are looking for more and more given their change in lifestyle. And so from sort of an investment thesis perspective, which is sort of venture private equity speak for, do you really want to invest in the space or not? We got there real fast. The challenge was finding something great to invest in. And so really, if Rudy and Ela had been farther along in their revenue cycle, I would be sitting here as an investor in Parch because I think the liquids are fantastic and the team is great. And we looked at Trip too. So along the way though, as an investor, it kind of comes down to brands being in the right place at the right time, and all the other stuff has to work too. So for us, for Dessoir, they had launched in January of 2022. It was all really D2C. Ryan had just started as head of sales, coming over from where it was incubated out of on the alcohol side, and we kind of fell in love with everything. And so they were just farther along and really ready for that, sort of venture capital. And it's really been a pleasure since we invested. I've been working with Ryan, obviously, until recently. The brand's growing really, really quickly because the category is growing quickly as well. And so for me, I drank mostly, I've been drinking this until recently, but all of the liquids are really great. But we just launched our version of an Aperol Spritz in June called Spritz Italiano, and it's off to an amazing start. And I was just at a trade event last week in Utah, and people were just completely over the moon about it. So we're super excited about that.
Fantastic. Hello, there we go. I would love to hear, let's go back to what's happening in the world, in culture, and that thing that we all swim in that has made this moment so kind of critical for non-alc and alc alternatives, because it seems to me for the first time there's been a sort of awakening en masse that actually your default way of existing as a grown-up does not have to be that alcohol is your crutch, your daily go-to. So I wonder what you feel began that movement? What sits behind it? What has changed that has really unlocked this kind of new mindset?
I think it's impossible to talk about this category without talking about COVID because it was the lightning bolt that just kind of set everything afire. There was products in the category before that time, but it just causes so many different things that you can't artificially create. And those are the things that will stand the test of time or will the category be here forever. So people had a time to overconsume, socializing completely changed. They had time to look at what health and wellness meant at a macro scale, and it was global all at the same time. And so coming out of that is where we see just this category gaining momentum, really taking over in terms of press coverage, above and beyond what really it was selling, which is quite amazing to me, how many articles across every type of media globally were covering this space. And then you see things that really fascinate me. So you see the Japanese government who 1 year in 2020, I believe it was, they saw their taxes plummet because people were not drinking enough alcohol, especially Gen Z and young Gen Xers. They launched a global competition for consumers to create the next big alcohol brand. And they funded that. And a year later, the government shifted to say, actually, we were wrong. We want you to help us create ways to not drink as much alcohol. Canadian government changing their regulations on what was safe consumption. European WHO changing consumption. I'm Irish originally. Cancer warnings coming out on bottles of alcohol mandated by 2025. So globally, it's an unprecedented shift. And then lifestyle-wise, socializing, there were so many people who were already living healthier parts of their life. And this is not, again, about, puritanical living. It's not about, just that goopy lifestyle consumer, which is something I push against a lot, and why our product is not necessarily a goopy product. It is about people who like to run, but they also like to eat pizza. And those running people are like, well, on my Wednesday, Tuesday, when I do my run or my workout, it doesn't really make sense to go to the bar and then drink a couple of pints to hang out with my friends. I actually want to drink Athletic, and it tastes pretty good. And so Athletic was the other big eye-opener that gave people credibility because of taste, that this, and it looks good. It's also really important that it looks good in your hand when you have a canned product or in the bar. Bartenders would be the third piece that really accelerated this. So I love going to bars, I love drinking alcoholic and non-alcoholic cocktails, but when I see an NA product on a menu that looks as good as the alcohol ones, and the bartenders love it and they're able to make as much money from it, and they are advocating for the category because they've seen the good and bad of liquor, those three things together have just game changed what this can be.
Great. And I think, Ryan, I love your perspective on, you talked about your latest iteration, which is this mindful range that you're doing. What changed in that space? We were saying this morning about people always used alcohol to escape, to get a buzz, to feel different, and it's almost like that became the only choice we had. And how have you guys seen that world of kind of mindfulness and different types of moods and feelings evolve and reacted to that?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with what I was saying there on that piece of what kind of evolved there. Being from California sober being a thing, we were talking about it earlier now, like microdosing mushrooms, I think falls into California sobriety. Not just.
We're all doing it right now.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. Right before we got on. No, but even like the legalization of cannabis and the way that that's happened, I think was a huge propeller of, because we talk about Gen Z is kind of the one driving a lot of this non-alc movement. You're seeing that they're not even starting to drink alcohol. They're just like moving on to other things that don't leave them with a hangover and everything else and feeling terrible. And so I think that is something that at least in the US has led a lot to people realizing, hey, maybe there are other things we can consume to get the experience or the lightweight feeling that we're wanting. With Trip, the co-founders, Dan and Liv, Dan got injured 7 weeks before his wedding, wasn't going to be able to walk down the aisle, and actually found that CBD really helped him regain his strength in his leg and everything. And so that's why they launched Trip with CBD. It was never about one exact adaptogen or plant, but more looking at plants as medicine and what can that give you. And so we also see it as, part of why I always hear my friends kind of talk about taking the edge off. At the end of the day, having a beer to take the edge off, and you don't realize that actually does not take the edge off of your nervous system. It's taking the edge off cognitively. which you think is impacting your nervous system. So it's still, there's a lot of education around these adaptogens and CBD. Even when I got the job, my dad's like, time to start tripping, bought a can. He goes, what's this going to do to me? And he's like nervous. He drinks like, 15 milligrams of CBD and his tongue might be out of his mouth. He's laid out on the couch. So there's still a lot of education around that of this is not going to impact you in like a crazy higher dose than alcohol does, but actually impact you really positively with your nervous system to calm your stress and anxiety.
I love that kind of taking the edge off. There is not only one way to do that, and actually there might be better ways to do that, and kind of opening up our minds to that. John, what were you looking for as those signs and signifiers that something was truly kind of scalable and here to stay about this category? What was it that you guys saw and thought, okay, well, this is not just a flash in the pan trend, this is a seismic shift in how we behave and make choices?
Yeah, it's a lot of what Isla and Ryan mentioned, because we started to look at the space. Ironically, we were looking for a spirit-infused seltzer brand to invest in. We're still looking for that. But at the same time, it was all the indicators that Isla mentioned coming out of COVID, some of the things that Ryan just mentioned as well. And then most of what we invest in actually is, because it's called Willow Growth Partners is the fund, and we just finished Fund 1 and we just finished raising Fund 2, which we're launching into now, and we're primarily focused on, because my two partners are both women, and that's the way the fund was constructed, we're very focused on brands that are founded, led, and run and built by women, and mostly products for women. So we're invested in Parallel, which is a prenatal vitamin brand, and so because of all those investments around women's and children, family-focused products, we're constantly looking at what just the health and wellness and medical community is saying. And that's part of what was accretive to everything these two just said, which is, and I say Brian's heard me say this 1,000 times, like the health and wellness community in this country is going to vilify alcohol for the next 15 years. They are rapidly convincing. College is worthless. Everyone does what they do in college, but you hit 23 years old and you're out of college, and between biometrics and like I have a Whoop I've been wearing since Christmas, everyone has Oura rings, you got your iWatches. So the technology around you is reinforcing, and it's getting more and more rapid and available, it's reinforcing the benefits of making better choices. And the health and wellness community is convincing 23 to, I'm more than 50 now, convincing us all that basically you're putting poison in your body, right? And so you're probably going to be doing less of it if you're paying any attention to things like recovery and quality of rest. Because, and I hate to say this because I've been in this in trades for about the last 15 years, once you look at the data and you keep looking at it, you wake up every morning and you realize, oh, I didn't have anything last night. And lo and behold, the efficacy of my sleep was not just a little better, it's a lot better, right? And that all racks back to recovery. And obviously you guys, Vitamin Shoppe caters to the kind of community and consumer that's focused on all of those things. So I think that's a big trend here. It's not as salacious as nicotine and the cigarette industry in terms of lung cancer, but it's not far away in terms of like liver wellness and just quality of life over time.
Yeah, and I think that's there. In there, you can make the argument for moderation and pulling back, as much as possible. But I think that's super interesting. The link to sleep, and I've got a mattress topper, and I can really clearly say, you did that, then that happened, and for the first time, that cause and effect is really clear. I think that you're right. That's going to reinforce behaviors, but then also you have to not just be a brand of denial and this is second best. What you guys had to do is come in and say, actually, we're going to make something that isn't a pale imitation, that isn't a tribute band, that is something that is really valid and brilliant on its own. And I'd love to know, in terms of just the product development, what went into that, and what was the challenge and the success you had in creating something that stood apart as itself, and was something people actively wanted to drink?
I think you're the only person who developed the
Oh,
product.
fair enough. I thought I kept jumping in first.
That's kind of how you started.
So I worked in the liquor industry, like I said, for about a decade, and 5 of those I led innovation for this big liquor company, and that was creating new brands. And I did so much research with hundreds and thousands of consumers. And I kept hearing from like senior execs that health and wellness and alcohol never went hand in hand. When people were drinking, they gave themselves a pass. It's like ice cream. So it was like, it doesn't have to be healthy if it's an indulgence. And I kept coming up against this, well, I don't know if that's true or not. I think there's a way to have healthy indulgence in socializing moments that are very adult. And I think what's beautiful in our partnership is really, like I mentioned, doesn't drink alcohol at all and has this very agave aficionado background. I'm much more a pragmatist and a realist. I love cocktails, I love flavor. I've also lived in multiple places. I've lived in New York, eating a lot of food across the US for 16 years. So flavor and drinks were really important, but it had to fit in the socializing world. And I remember thinking, making this, when making for someone else, it was one thing, but when it became my brand, it pivoted a little. I wanted to feel as proud to bring this to someone's house as I would a bottle of Casadrones or a really nice mezcal. Usually I'll find a weird orange wine or a weird mezcal brand that just, I like the packaging. So I wanted people to feel that. They were alcohol drinkers I was catering to in my mind. People like me, they were probably in their 30s to 40s. They didn't know they needed to cut back. They weren't even looking at this category. And when I saw wins with my straight, older male friends who love mezcal, I was like, wow, that's like the furthest point for me of who I was targeting. If they are starting to drink this and incorporate it into their world, go, wow, this is really good. And sometimes I'll add a splash of mezcal, then that is great. So design is so critical, and I wanted this to be not gendered, like female, like I said before. Our team, and actually our design team that I brought on board, are 2 guys. One grew up Mormon, has never drunk. Both are covered in tattoos, super creative folks. One guy more like me, wants to drink less. It was so important that we didn't become goopy. And I think design and aesthetics is just so critical. You're holding it, people want to know what you're drinking. It's the Red Bull effect, whatever you want to call it. And that's critical. Liquid taste, if you get people to want to interact with you before they'll actually drink it. Our liquid is incredible. We spent a year developing it. It's won tons of awards. Mostly, we get a kick every day, every sampling we do. People cannot believe how good it is because their benchmark for non-alc is trippy bands. I love that. They're just watered down or soda-esque. These are real cocktails without booze. And the reason for that is we take 3 parts of organic rubber agave. We use parts of the plant that people don't really use. We make our own agave bitters, agave fiber, which is inulin, and then agave nectar. We source it from Jalisco, which is where they produce Donohue and the finest tequilas, and then we use desert fruits, botanicals, kind of evoking the Sonoran Desert. So an arid adapted environment where we believe the best things that grow together go together, because nature has this natural harmony of bringing flavors together. So complexity, craft, and curiosity is kind of in each account.
Hello. Yeah, I love that sense that actually what you're making something authentic, and that's why I'm sure I don't like using the word mocktails because it makes it sound like something it's not. What you made is an authentic cocktail with no alcohol. So thinking about the category and essentially, when it's this nascent, it's a bit of a land grab, and it favors those who can act fast and decisively. So I'd love to hear from you, John, how you guys have overseen that process for Dessoir, of how has it been able to move fast, be decisive, think fast, and kind of take its place as a category leader?
Yeah, this is actually a lot of what Ryan and I spent a lot of time together on over the last, call it 18 months, is that the category is emerging most rapidly in premium grocery, and Vitamin Shoppe, for example, is kind of an outlier in a great way, because it's not, I would say, directly in line with a lot of where the lion's share of the distribution has grown. What's interesting is that because there's no merchandising for it out in the general trade, it's been interesting to watch where it actually has emerged. And most of it is, and I say most because there's some outliers, but most of it is in the wine and spirit or adult beverage sections at these premium and really nowadays conventional grocers. It's not bi-coastal. It's not led by on-premise, although everyone's chasing on-premise. And what's also happened is it's also come out of the fact that in beverage in general, there's like 3 ways to reach retail, aka consumers. So there's direct, like our collective relationship with Vitamin Shoppe, we're shipping directly to warehouse. And then there's these broadliners. There's 2 really big ones, and they serve by and large the natural premium grocers around the country. One was created to serve Whole Foods, the other one was really created to serve Sprouts, and nowadays they serve a lot of everybody. And I think we're all kind of tackling that because they have embraced the category faster than traditional wine and spirit distributors. And traditional wine and spirit distributors are conflicted, right? Because they want to drop off box cases of Tito's and Grey Goose and whatever else, and, and a lot of tequila, right? So, but they're picking it up now. And so I think what you're seeing is over time, they're embracing the category because they're seeing the consumers are grasping it. They're seeing what's going on with non-alc beer. Non-alc beer is way out front, but the wine and spirit people that I just mentioned, either in the stores or in the distributors, they don't have any beer to speak of, right? Because beer people are different than wine and spirit people. It's kind of interesting. As a consumer, you don't realize how they're pretty much 2 different worlds at the end of the day. And so now the wine and spirit and conventional grocers and call it traditional wine and spirit chains. It's a little different here because in New York, New Jersey, everything's independent because it's a lot of big licensed kind of on the chain side of things. So that's a lot of how it's emerged. And so you're seeing real sets, right? You're seeing not just a couple of SKUs sitting on a shelf with other wine, you have to hunt for it. You're seeing 4-foot shelves. You're seeing really good point of sale materials. You're seeing really nice, and that is a huge kind of turning point for a category.
Yeah.
We've seen that with, like when I was in the water business, we bought a couple of wineries, and there's you saw that in wine. We were in California wine, but you saw like with Chilean and Spanish wine or Argentinian wine, the minute someone put up a little sign that said, "Hey, great Spanish wine here," velocities just tripled. And it was like, oh, I never thought about that. And so I think that's a lot of where this category is. And it's that consumer, because they're in, maybe to Isla's point earlier, they're in that usage occasion mindset, right? I'm having a party and I know 3 people coming don't drink or don't drink during the week, and I want to have that alternative.
Yeah. And I think showing that variety which you've got, which is kind of represented up here, sort of gives people, consumers who are looking at it, that sense of, okay, actually this is something that reflects me and my choices, as opposed to if I don't want something with alcohol, it's kind of forcing me down, one lane. So that's distribution, obviously a huge factor in all of this. I also want to talk about how you're generating demand and awareness. And I see on your can right there that collab with Calm feels like a really, really interesting tactic. And I know obviously Dessoir has Katy Perry on board. So what are those tactics, those growth levers that you are pulling, and how is it different to sort of an old school brand with these guys?
Sure. I think first and foremost, moving from CBD to our mindful blends as a brand, realizing just the laws aren't changing in the US, so we need to figure out what can work in that space. But then, as you mentioned, the Calm app, what's really exciting, huge partnership for us to have landed, and it was more of an organic thing where it wasn't like head of marketing talking to head of marketing, but actually Olivia, our co-founder, getting sat next to the founder of Calm multiple times at different events, and finally them being like, I think we're onto something here. But Trip wants to be known for calm the same way Red Bull's known for energy. And so the exciting thing about this partnership is that there's a QR code on the back of all of our cans. This flavor specifically, because it's cucumber mint, it's got that blue packaging. We put the logo of Calm right on the front, where all of our other flavors still have it on the back label, but you get a $45, 3-month free membership to Calm. So any of your customers, as we're launching with retailers like Vitamin Shoppe in February, we will offer this to the whole staff of that retailer. So really cool way to go beyond just our beverages providing calm, but having a holistic approach to, hey, this is really important.
Yeah, the regular relaxation.
Is a fantastic idea, I think. And I think, John, tell me how we're doing for time.
Good.
Okay, great, fantastic. Yeah, tell me about the Katy Perry partnership. I've seen a lot of Katy Perry recently in my world, which can only be a good thing.
She has a lot going on right now, which is a blessing and a challenge, I would say. So Katie got involved from the very beginning. So co-creator, co-founder of the brand. She's written checks into the business. Like she's not taking a nickel out of it. She sits in her own board seat, and she's been very involved in the creative process from the beginning. And the story, I wasn't there for this part, but the story goes that she met Morgan early on. Morgan McLaughlin is an award-winning distiller on the west coast of California. She grew up kind of as a hippie chick in LA in the movie industry, but she got into distilling and making vermouths and other fine spirits. That's actually when Ryan got involved with Amass, the incubation company. They make gin and vodka, for example. And the two of them were kind of met through mutual friends and CAA, the big agency that obviously Katie's been with forever. So they're all invested. CAA has a lot of money in this, and Katie owns a nice chunk of the business. So she drives. We launched D2C, and so obviously she's very effective there. I mean, across social channels, she has about 400 million followers, and of course the challenge is a lot of that's in places where we don't have distribution yet. But at the same time, she drives a lot of business with the brand, which is really great.
Yeah.
It's got to be, yeah. And Ida, what's your approach to growth, innovation, marketing? What are you guys getting involved in that's going to kind of push you forward?
We had a first collaboration product earlier this year, so we collaborated with Daybreaker. They're the largest sober dance party in the world. They've taken us on pretty early on, like a year ago. So at all their parties and social events, it's usually at 6 to 9 a.m. morning rave. It's an hour of yoga and then 2 hours of full live music. Sometimes at Solid Disco, but an amazing place like Rockefeller Center. On boats across the San Francisco harbor, like just incredible venues and an amazing, fun, feel-good endorphin release. So we launched a tea elixir with them because they're a morning brand, so we wanted to create something that was a little bit different to our cocktails, just our alcohol, eating alternatives, and that's been going well. We're going to launch that in one exclusive retailer for dry January.
I think each of those kind of really represent the fact that you've got to do the partnership with the person that represents you at your best and has that kind of real alignment of values. I think we might have come to some questions right now. You don't need to speak anymore. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm probably your target audience because I have the squad in my fridge. It's picked up from Target this past weekend. So I'm looking forward to trying it. I have that with the Italian on, so I'm looking forward to trying that. But one thing that Brian, you mentioned was the education around adaptogens, and I think that's one thing that, as someone who is super curious about wanting, how much can I drink? So I'm thinking of what methods of communication will you be using to educate, because that's a lot of education that's needed, and everyone's attention spans are short, and everyone has only so much headspace. So what are some of your methods of communication? Yeah,
absolutely. On shelf, you have 5 seconds maybe to educate a customer and grab their attention, right? Yeah. Children, even less. And so for us at Trip, at least, we have the adaptogens showing on the side there. There's a call out on the front on some of the cans that say like infused with magnesium. And there are some adaptogens that you can call out and the quantities there, so we make sure to put that on there. Even as I was learning the product, I was loving the fact that we have 120 milligrams of magnesium. If you consume 2,000 milligrams of magnesium over an extended period of time, it can actually be toxic to your body. So one thing to make our beverages sessionable was making sure that there's a dose in there that actually is calming, but not to where, you know, if you're gonna have 4 or 5 of these, which my like launch into the brand was going to Newtopia now, and I actually drink like 5 a day. You're totally fine still. You know, it's not going to be something where you go too far to the other side. There is a difficulty of consumers. There's some of it that they need to be self-taught with when it comes to adaptogens. And then, as I'm learning, even with Trip being a global brand, in the EU, country by country, the same way here, state by state with cannabis laws, the laws and regulations are very different on what you can have. I mean, they're calling it novel foods and everything, but was this consumed in this way prior to a certain year? And if not, then it's a novel food and there's totally different regulations. And so the same thing here in the US, right? There were a lot of CBD brands. I know we were talking about how Governor Newsom in California just like kind of collapsed a lot of the Delta 9 stuff and cannabis and everything. And so
collapse is a nice word.
but yeah, so it's something as a brand too, you have to be really on top of knowing what's coming and trying to be innovative and make sure that you are using safe amounts. And so for us, we put the amounts that we can on there without having to be a supplement label, which totally changes then what category you sit in and everything, which I think is really important, right? Because I think if you end up with a supplement label, which I know there are some other non-alc brands, a big one I think Kin originally had a supplement label on there, and it constricts you to what stores you can be in and where in that store you can be.
Just so.
So, listening to your description of the formulation of Parch, it sounded awesome. It sounded super authentic to the actual drink. But using agave and some of these other things, obviously you're going to carry. One of the other negatives of alcohol is calories, you know, the sugars, all of those things. So you see this market also going into, because if I'm not drinking and I'm not getting a buzz per se, I probably don't want just a drink. I'm not going to go buy a full-fledged Coca-Cola, so I probably wouldn't buy that. Are you looking into alternatives to use some type of either artificial or natural sweetener in there to reduce the sugar and calories?
Great question. We get that often. Our product is an indulgent product. So just like alcohol is an indulgence, we're not chasing zero. So there are plenty of products out there. If you're chasing a 0 calorie, 0 sugar lifestyle, there's plenty of options out there. Ours is about flavor first, and we use the highest integrity agave nectar along with agave inulin, so that plant fiber balances any inulin spikes you might have in your blood sugar. We don't believe in the taste benefit or the overall holistic benefit of alternative sweeteners. There's still a lot of data out there that says they're not better for you, and we still love taste.
So how much sugar is in a can of that, just out of curiosity?
This one is 50 calories, and there's 12 grams of sugar. So compared to Coca-Cola or compared to a Paloma, it's about a quarter to a fifth of a traditional alcohol cocktail.
And I think that gets back into like, there's so much white space in this category. We're not necessarily fighting each other for the same shelf or the same shelf space, right? There's going to be different brands who stand for different things. And that's like super important to build a total category.
Well, I love to say, I mean, if you look at the category of alcohol, let's go to a liquor store. Like, that's the white space. So currently, non-alc is 0.5% of the entire alcohol market in the US. We believe it can be up to 20%. And the predictions for the next 20 years are that it can get there. You can look at where non-alc beer is in Germany, which is the most evolved market. It's about 17 to 18%. That means 1 in 5 drinks consumed in an adult occasion are non-alcoholic. And we believe the US consumers are moving that fast, that it can get there.
Some serious headroom. There are 2 more questions, I think. One over here.
It sounds like you guys all have experience from the traditional wine, spirits, and beer world. I'm curious about the reception from those legacy players. Are mocktail non-alcoholic drinks embraced? Are they investing in it, or are they threatened by it, or somewhere in between? What does that look like?
I love that question because a ton of distributors have come up to us who tend to be folks I used to deal with in the past. So very traditional, over 50, usually male. And they're, what's going on? My kids don't drink. Can you explain it to me? And their kids are between 18 to 26. And they're like, I don't know what's going on. And they're just confused. So there's a lot of confusion. There's definitely some people who are pushing back. And you see there's quite a few folks who are trying to lobby against any data that does link alcohol consumption to breast cancer, which has been highly correlated, and it's about 140 peer-reviewed studies saying that alcohol is correlated with different cancers. So people are trying to quash that data. But now it's sticky, and they're really seeing the impact of their bottom line. So spirits have the worst performance in 30 years. It's the first year the spirits industry has declined in 30 years in the US. And they say it's inflation, that's definitely a component, inflation, cost of product, and cost of going out partying. But there's no denying that the embracing of Gen Z to this category, but the highest consumption is amongst millennials. So as that population continues to grow, it's only going to continue to eat away at their shelf and profits.
And I can verify we're sort of a new model strategy and innovation consultancy, and all of our clients in the alcohol space are really thinking about what their future plans are in this space and realize that actually if they just sit back and watch it grow, it is going to hit that 20% point with or without them. So I think there's a lot of how they plan to be involved, whether it's through M&A acquisitions or whether it's through new brand creation or new SKUs. So they're very much focused on that.
One thing I would mention, like John kind of said earlier, like the shelf space that's being taken is in alcohol. And so we've had like a big national chain that we've spoken to where they're like, hey, I'm having to fight with the beer category and this wine category to get that shelf space, which is why like we're not growing as much as they could, right? And then you also get into the big legacy distributors. Their top level understands it. They understand that that is what's happening. The issue becomes that they've kind of had a whole state by state of you either work with them or someone else, but you don't get to work with all of us. And within the broadliner distribution and just non-alc in general and legally, you as a non-alc brand don't have to sign those contracts. And so that's made it really interesting on how to expand and how to navigate the landscape, especially when for some of these retailers, it's the alcohol buyer buying it who wants to work with their connections of DSD houses and alcohol.
Great. Last question.
Just curious how you guys feel about the mass emergence of like seltzers, tea, canned beverages that it feels like every alcohol and beverage brand is coming out with. Is that kind of saturating the market or kind of taking over the shelves, or do you find that the non-alcohol beverage is silent enough?
You specifically, you're talking about things like White Claw and Truly
White
and
Claw,
that whole.
Surfside, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that market is pretty played out. White Claw won, and they continue to hold a massive share. There's lots of little brands and things will pop up. What's going on in that space right now is the spirit infused products. Gallo, High Noon, they're doing pretty well with that. And so that's where the action is right now, where people are taking tequila and vodka primarily and putting it in the same cans that you would buy a White Claw in, and that's what consumers are gravitating to. You mentioned it. I mean, spirits is having a rough go. Wine is on its ass. Every wine person in the world is looking for a job, and craft beer is troubled because everyone wanted to cash a check and now no one's buying anything. And cider's dead, right? So that's sort of the dynamic that's created this kind of overall malaise. So low and no alc on fire, obviously. And other than that, spirit infused stuff, mostly seltzers, in great cans to compete with the cheap White Claw and other stuff that's on the market. And they're starting to give those products away at retail, right? So retailers now aren't that interested because it's great for us as consumers if I don't buy those, but if you do buy those, great. Because you're basically buying beer, by the way. It's almost all flavored malt beverages. It's just clear malt alcohol that's lightly flavored. But when they start being given away, no one's making any money. So that means all the retailers are looking for something more interesting that consumers will actually buy, and they'll make some money. They'll make some margin on, right? So.
Awesome, fantastic. We are very much out of time. There are mocktails for you all to enjoy in the room next door. Thank you very, very much to the panelists, to the audience.